The Living Zen-podcast is a gift from the members and associates of the Victoria Zen Centre to you. If you enjoy it, please be sure to let your friends know about Living Zen. If you'd like to support our community, download the Living Zen-podcast app for iPod, iPhone, and Android. One of the most meaningful ways to show your support is by becoming a part of our Sangha as an associate. Your commitment of $10 a month will ensure that offerings like the Living Zen podcast and our online e-Zendo will continue to be available around the world to everyone with an interest in truly living Zen. To become an associate, please visit our website at zenwest.ca and click on Become an Associate. Many more Zen Talks are available for purchase on iTunes and Amazon.com. Just search for Venerable Eshu Martin. These talks are also available for free on our website to all members and associates of the Victoria Zen Centre. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your support. I started practicing Zen when I was 22 years old, and I was a young man. And a young man in probably the worst sense of the term. When I went to the monastery, I believed that the way to become a good monk was to leave everything behind, to end the relationship that I was in, to get rid of all my belongings, to sort of cut ties to the outside world, and to retreat to the monastery on the mountain where I could become enlightened. So I did that. And it wasn't very long. After I got there, when in interview with my teacher, I was always very enthusiastic and wanted to get to the bottom of this great matter. And I would say to the teacher, what do I need to do? What do I need to give up? Or what great, physical feat do I need to accomplish to understand this stuff, to really get this stuff, to become enlightened? And time after time, we had interview with the teacher usually 4 times a day. And time after time, he would just respond, just grow up. Maybe for the first little while, I took this as something that maybe girlfriends had told me, and teachers had told me, and my parents had told me, and definitely my sisters had told me, oh, grow up. But after a while, I started to realize that the way that the Roshi said it wasn't the same way that these other people had said it. Growing up, becoming mature is the practice of Zen. Not just for the 22-year-old man on the mountain, but for each and every one of us. We all sit down and we engage in this practice of zazen, of dissolving. As we sit, the body begins to become more still, the mind becomes more quiet, and we begin to be able to see with awareness the activities of our thoughts, our mind, and our emotions. We begin to be able to reflect with awareness on our relationships, on our interactions. As we continue to practice, we begin to become more and more aware of how our habits began, where they came from. How the very way that we interact with each other, with the world around us, arises from examples that we have been given, situations that we have been found ourselves in, the experiences that we've had throughout our lives. We're able to say, I like this because of that. We're able to say, I respond like this to a situation because maybe my father did that, or my mother did that, or my friends when I was growing up did this. My son is going to be 12 years old in a few weeks. And so we're looking and talking a lot about what it means to grow up. We've had some really interesting conversations, and this saying, "from the mouths of babes," is certainly appropriate, because the wisdom that comes out of these conversations after just taking the time to have them. So, when we investigate what this means, what does it mean to grow up? We acknowledge that for much of our lives we are told things, we are shown things, we are given things, and we do them. We do them because we're told to do them. We do things because we're told that it's good to do them. We do things because we're told that that's just how it's done. And our relationship with the way that we walk in this world is very simplistic. We do things because we want to be good. We want to be a good child. We want to be a good student. We want to be a good boyfriend or girlfriend, or a good musician, or a good artist. But we haven't yet come to the place where we more deeply consider what it is that we're doing and why. We haven't yet come to the realization that the options for what we can do are limitless. For many of us, we grow up with a very narrow channel of possibility. We grow up with just this limited vision, conditioned by our families, conditioned by our culture and society, conditioned by our education. And perhaps sometime in our lives, we find ourselves at a point where the panorama opens up, and just for a moment we glimpse the vastness of our own capacity, the vastness of what's possible, the vastness of what we can do, how we can impact this world and the relationships that we make in it. And for many of us, this realization is terrifying. This realization, in its vastness, in its innumerable options, becomes paralyzing. We get stuck. When I was talking to my kids about growing up, what we came to was that growing up has a lot to do with making choices. Choices about how we want to go forward and manifest in the world. Choices about how we want to use our life and our energy to impact this cosmos. But the first step in accepting this is recognizing that although we are very small, and although at times we can seem insignificant, that when we move forward with conviction, we can make a tremendous impact on the lives of others. And yes, in this whole world, in this universe. And we have a choice. We can act in ways that assure our own limited comfort, our own limited sense of security. And to do this, we need to sort of limit our consideration of everybody else. We have to focus on what makes us happy. The other way that we can go is to act, to manifest in ways which benefit all of us, which benefit this vast cosmos. This way is scary too, because it means that at times we may act in ways which don't make us comfortable, which don't make us happy in the short term, but reduce suffering for many. With each of our lives, we act. With each of our lives, we are intimately connected with everything else in this vast cosmos. When we lift our hand, already this universe has changed with this simple gesture. It's not the universe that existed before we moved our hand. When I interact with another human being, this is not some isolated event. How many of us have had our entire day changed by a single interaction in traffic or in a coffee shop, either by a gesture of rudeness or by a gesture of simple kindness? How has that impacted how we meet and interact with the next person, the next object, the next activity? So as we practice, as we begin to apply this awareness, this wisdom that arises through practice, we can recognize that practice, awakening, is awakening to the acceptance of responsibility. The responsibility for what it is to be a human being. The responsibility for what it is to be a Buddha, one who is awake. If we stay asleep, we can just continue to imagine that this world is made up of discrete little units that float around, bumping into each other, that have little to do and no impact on one another. But this is the dream of a child. As we practice, as our eyes open, we see that this cosmos is seamless, that each of us is intimately related with the other, that when we act, it has an impact. This can be scary. We can say, no, I don't want it to be that way. But as we practice more and more, we see that we are not just robots condemned to act out the programming that we have received as children in a particular culture. But as we become more and more clear, more and more aware of where we have come from, we become more and more aware of the choices that we have to make. We become more and more aware that to grow up, to truly mature as human beings, as Buddhas, it requires that we accept responsibility for our lives. It requires that we accept responsibility for our next action. It requires that we manifest wholeheartedly in our very next breath. So this task or this challenge, this koan that my teacher gave me, just grow up, is one that I think doesn't end. It doesn't end when we're 12 or 14 or 25 or 40 or 70. This koan of just grow up, this challenge, just grow up, has no bottom. It has no end, and is at the very heart of Zen practice. So thank you all for coming to engage in this practice of growing up together. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.